man, womanizing, raping, calling stupid, pickle-suited nigger.
Don't call anybody.
Radio Free Innsmouth, episode 186. This week, gonna do something a little bit different. Instead of talking about some band where I'm like, hey, this is band blah blah blah, this is everything I know about them, okay, let's go. No. We're doing different stuff this time around. We're talking about a format. We're talking about splits.
네, 여러분 안녕하세요. 오늘은
No, not these splits. I mean, I like those too for, reasons. Nah, this time we're talking about split releases. That phenomenon where you got, okay, here's one band, they do like 4 songs or something. Here's this other band, they do another 4 songs. It mostly started out in the punk scene with like split 7 inches, which are actually a Ponzi scheme that allows generic bands like Crippled Bastards and Agothicles to stay in business.
Oh, shit!
Nah, but for real, I actually do like split releases a lot. Part of it is because
I got this thing called autism.
and the attention span of a goldfish raised on pixie sticks. So if the choice is between listening to like one band's whole album or like multiple thirds of an album by different bands in sequence, I'm always going to go with the latter. But also in a lot of cases, the more well-known band on the split will be putting out music you can't really hear anywhere else, or maybe like a different and more exciting version of an album track, and then like on the other side of the split, some band you haven't even heard of and it turns out they're really awesome. Best example of this would probably be Argus Lent and Marshall Barrage's Send Forth the Best Ye Breed, which features not only the best version of my favorite Argus Lent song, but also introduced me to the great Canadian band Marshall Barrage that I never would have heard of if they hadn't done a split with Argus Lent, so thanks for that. Specifically, the kind of splits we're going to be talking about this week, though, are a very interesting, almost entirely Eastern European phenomenon of the late 90s and early 2000s, wherein you would have one side of the split is a Rock Against Communism band, and the other side of the split is a NSBM, National Socialist Black Metal band. These are interesting because a lot of times like both styles would kind of bleed into each other, particularly in Eastern Europe. Examples of this would be Keyborg split with Svartskog, which is amazing, or even more apropos to this episode, Infernal Wars split with Warhead, simply titled Explosion.
What the fuck?
This CD is absolutely fucking essential. It features some great material from Infernal War, who are one of the best Polish death metal bands. Occasionally you see people call them a black metal band.
Isn't that cute? But it's wrong!
You even see people accuse them of being like a Marduk ripoff, and that's just entirely false. These guys play really fast and nasty, sort of like morbid angel-y, angel corpsey death metal. Probably most notable for the amazing work from drummer Stormblast. And this isn't Stormblast like the Dimmu Borgir album, which means like storm blown in Norwegian. And that fits that album because it's very light and airy. This is Stormblast like you're getting blasted by a fucking storm. This drummer kicks ass. Might have to do an episode on Infernal War at some point. And then the other side of the split is this band called Warhead, who are exceptionally interesting in terms of black metal and rack historiosity, because it's a 2-man collaboration between Knyaz Vargoth of Nocturnal Mortem, the oldest and probably most important Ukrainian black metal band, and Olaf from Honor, the oldest and probably most important Polish rack band. And then you have Stormblast playing drums on the entire album, both sides of the split, and he also has done live drums for like Honor in the past. And the final song on the split is actually a collaboration song between all members of both bands being featured. It's interesting stuff. But speaking of Honor, that's the main topic of the episode today. Finally getting into it. We are talking about a CD that I've had MP3s of since I was in high school, and I finally managed to get a physical copy. It's called Raiders of Revenge, and it is a split between the oldest and most important Polish rack band, Honor, and the oldest and most important Polish black metal band, Graveland. I'm assuming most people know what the deal is with Graveland, but Honor's big for like rack people, and some black metal people are probably aware of them, but I feel like they might need a little bit more introduction than Graveland does. So here we go. These guys were kind kind of on that Bound for Glory style development track, wherein they started out pretty much pure like rack hard rock stuff and then gradually became more metal. But even on their very earliest material, you could still hear a lot of what would be like their trademark sound across all releases. And that would be their powerful emotionality. These guys are sort of the master of the rack ballad, if you ask me. Even more so than Screwdriver with the Snowfell. Lots of cool, clean guitar stuff. And also some pretty hard-hitting percussive riffs. And hard-hitting emotional vocals. They aren't like technically good vocals in the same sense of like a power metal band, but I really like the emotion this guy brings. I don't even speak Polish, but I still feel like his vocals are very impactful for me. He just puts a whole lot of emotion into them, and he has like this sort of coarse voice that fits this pretty rough around the edges hard rock stuff. See, very nice classic hard rock riffs. Pretty darn good production too, especially since, when did this come out? This is from like the late 80s, early 90s. And it has a potent groove to almost all of it. You know, a lot of people be like, this is like an entirely message-based band. Why would you listen to a completely message-based band in a language that you don't speak? I don't know, I think the emotion behind his vocals communicates whatever message he's going for just as well as if I could actually translate the lyrics. And we all know what the fucking lyrics are about. I don't want to get kicked off YouTube. Also, check out this part. This part's cool. Early Honor's got a lot of this almost like gothy, like post-punk stuff in it. Very cool. There was actually a whole lot of really good post-punk coming out of like Soviet Union era Poland with stuff like Sikiera and whatnot. And these guys sort of incorporated that into their more hard rock sound for a pretty unique take on the style. But by the time we get to Raiders of Revenge, these guys have undergone pretty much the same transition that Bound for Glory did, where there's like a clear influence from more metallic subgenres. In this case, instead of thrash metal, these guys were clearly way more into like black metal and pagan metal, with like the grinding tremolo pick guitars, those nice drums. Also, his vocals got very, very interesting. Sort of like a singing death metal growl. Utterly unique stuff. Really dig this guy's vocals. Nice and catchy, hard rock, big open choruses with humming in the background. You gotta love this. Hang on.
네, 여러분 안녕하세요. 오늘은
You heard that too, right? Play that shit back again, Jamie. I know I didn't hear this guy just say autistic wrath. Holy fuck. I mean, yeah, it's in Polish. I know he's not actually saying that, but goddamn if that didn't fucking sound like homeboy was yelling, autistic wrath! Like, that's fucking funny to me, because I'm an idiot. But yeah, that was from the Honor album that was contemporaneous with the Raiders of Revenge split. Gives you a basic idea of what they sound like at this point in their career. The split starts off with a really big, heavy riff that has an important pedigree behind it. You got these like bar chords, the marching sort of like drum chant, rowing, Viking backbeat type thing. You've heard this riff kind of before, and it's very important for this kind of metal. This guitar and drum technique is pretty important for a lot of pagan metal. In this case, we're using an example, Crota from the Ukraine. They use this kind of riff a lot. God's Tower from Belarus's entire discography has this kind of riff all over it. They utilize it because of the amount of negative space it has in it with these like chugs. Lets you overlay a whole lot of stuff, and God's Tower is a band that's all about layers. Now, most people will call this kind of riff a Bathory riff. Specifically, the kind of riff that Quorthon would use a lot on the Viking metal albums, Hammerheart and Twilight of the Gods. You got these like big expansive bar chords, the very percussive, kind of like Viking rowing chant style drumming. But actually, this style wasn't even originally created by Bathory. They just kind of built on it. If you want to find out where this style comes from, you got to go way back to the early 80s. Fucking Manowar, dude. They were all about this sort of like backbeat drum, bar chord riff combination. And both Bathory and Manowar were very important for at least like the more metal end of the rack spectrum. Moving on farther into that Honor song, we hear them building off of that Manowar Bathory foundation with some more melodic layering. and a lot of like very black metal atmosphere. In fact, very Graveland-esque atmosphere with that wind noise. Also, the drums give me a heavy Graveland vibe, but put a pin in that for now. We're going to come back to the comparisons of them and Graveland. Right now, you just get to enjoy his amazing vocals. This is the best he ever sounded, if you ask me. I really love the vocal tone on this. I love the slight reverb, everything, perfect atmosphere. Nails the emotion. And it's, I don't know, I haven't heard other vocals like this. It is literally like almost a death growl, but also singing. It's interesting. Here comes a little cool guitar part. This weird little kind of like octave jumping thing he's doing inside the chord with some very emotive vocals that once again aren't technically good, you know, in the same way that like fucking Sonata Arctica is, but they are great in terms of conveying that emotion he's going for. Also, there's lots of these cool little sort of like interlude parts with lots of keyboards that I think may actually have been played by Rob Darkin from Graveland. But yeah, anyways, speaking of Graveland, Graveland is very important for this era of Honor, notwithstanding the fact that they did a split with them. Graveland kind of like just influenced Honor a lot on this album. So here's what Graveland sounded like at the time they recorded the Raiders of Revenge split. This is off of Immortal Pride, which came out like a year prior. Graveland is noted for their layered melodies and also his very unorthodox sort of like right-hand guitar technique where he jangles the chords quite a bit more than would normally be done in black metal instead of just straight up tremolo picking them really quick. It's kind of like a little bit more jumpy and like folky sounding. Interesting stuff. And he has these like really layered like melancholic melodies with a massive keyboard drone layer. That's pretty much unique to Graveland at this time, and it influenced Honor a whole lot. Also, when it gets like faster and blastier, you start adding in more like single string tremolo lines. That's a big part of Graveland. So now you know what Graveland sounds like around then. Let's check it out, Honor's take on that style. The percussive riffs are sort of in between that sort of Manowar stutter riff and that Graveland like jangle riff. And then that layered tremolo melody in the background there, that is definite Graveland worship, but done in more of like a rack style, which I find to be very interesting. Also a nice little sort of like layered melodic arpeggio right here. That's good stuff. These guys are big on having a very expansive sound. And I think that kind of sets them apart from a lot of the more lo-fi rack bands. This blasty bit right here, this is totally... You could trick someone into thinking this was Graveland, but it's not. It's Honor. And as soon as the vocals come in, that's when you figure that out. And I love that they managed to meld these two styles so well. Like completely smooth, this sort of like rack black metal thing. I haven't really heard somebody take this sort of like Polish style black metal and mix it with rack as well as Honor did. Also, those keyboards are very Graveland sounding. There's that same sort of like constant melodic sonorous drone in the background. It's cool that like these two bands obviously influenced each other. I mean, Graveland got more folky and more, you know, and then Honor got more extreme and black metal-y. And they also started doing stuff like this, where there's kind of interludes in a very Graveland style between each of the songs on this split. I really like these parts too. Like, they're not just sort of like throwaway intros and outros. There's actual music going on here that I find to be very interesting and layered and very Graveland sounding. Now, I mentioned earlier, Honor is sort of like the master of the rack ballad, and my favorite rack ballad they ever did, 1,000 Years Bonds, is the final Honor song on this split. It is built entirely around acoustic guitars, clean electric guitars, and keyboards, as opposed to the more like drum-heavy black metal influenced tracks. And I think it's just as interesting as those. I really like that little acoustic guitar ostinato in the beginning. I like the synth loop. I love the vocals here. These are really good vocals. Like, very emotional, especially when he kind of hits it a little bit wrong, but in sort of like a folky way that you can tell it's on purpose. It's hard to explain, but you know when you hear it. It makes the, right there, makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Really good chorus here. So much feeling. And I like how he sort of like spits out the last line of each stanza. You know, it's very desperate sounding in like a really good sort of, you know, rack ballad way. Also the solos here. Yeah, there's solos and they're really good. These sort of like airy melodic ones that then head into some interesting, here it comes. Like bluesy almost, right there. Really cool track, 1,000 Years Bonds. Probably my favorite on the entire split. Also, the strings are very stirring, emotional. They're an emotional band, but it's not gay. It's just that these guys and Bound for Glory really have like the tearjerker Rock Against Communism ballad on lock. You know what I mean?
아, 이거는 못 고르지.
You're right. We gotta get to the Graveland side of this split. This episode's already gonna be a long one. Like I said, most of you probably know Graveland, but hell, every episode is somebody's first episode. So if you don't know Graveland, they started out as a 3-piece sounding like this. Really spooky, dark black metal with nice organs and a really like thick, nasty guitar sound, and it was good. Later on, it got pared down to just the main guy, Rob Darkin, doing it as a solo project, and it was much more kind of uplifting and pagan sounding. Like that. Good vocals right there. That's how it is. And pretty much every Graveland album exists somewhere on a continuum between those two extremes. Graveland's side of this split album is definitely more towards the ho 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 thing. Ow! Alright, sorry, no more singing. But yeah, the Graveland side of the Raiders of Revenge split sounds like most late 90s, early 2000s Graveland, which means you have a lot of this like jangly, folky right-hand guitar technique. There's a lot of full stops and transitions. And despite the fact that there is 3 Graveland songs on this split as opposed to Honor's 4 songs, both sides of the album are 24 minutes because Graveland songs are quite a bit longer, usually in the 7 to 9 minute range. What this means is that they are very dreamlike and complex. Also, he does a lot of cool drum tricks. Watch this. That's good fucking stuff. Very 13th Warrior kind of cinematic vibes from this music. Or perhaps more importantly, like Conan the Barbarian. Basil Polidoris' soundtrack to that movie was a massive influence on this era of Graveland and his ambient side project, Lord Wind. If I were to kind of pinpoint the difference between these two bands, it actually would be not necessarily a matter of ideology, but more like what motivates the music. Honor feels like it's very modern day stuff, kind of looking to the past to reclaim old values that society may have lost, whereas Graveland is very much past is alive. You know, he wears swords, he does the reenactments, he's dressed up in armor on the album cover, he's keeping that shit 100% medieval all the time. Two very different ways of looking at the world, but not necessarily opposed, and you could see why people that held these two belief systems would probably get along and feed off of each other a lot artistically. And it also means that you get the goofy interior picture on this album, where you got 2 guys from Honor on the left and the right, Sieg Heiling wearing tracksuits, and then Rob Darkin in the middle in full medieval regalia holding a sword up, and it says Aryan Brotherhood of Fight on top. It's great. You know, like maybe the English isn't perfect, maybe the production's a little wonky, but overall, this is a very charming album. This is what underground metal is supposed to be. So the question remains, you know, if this split is Honor versus Graveland, if you're gonna look at it like that, which one did a better job? This might actually shock some of you, given like, you know what my tastes are, but I actually like the Honor side more.
I know what you're thinking.
Obviously, the Graveland side is great, but it's also like, this is just standard late 90s Graveland, and it's not really like the best example of that. Honestly, I thought like the full-length Creed of Iron that came out right around this time was a little bit better than their side of the split, whereas like the Honor side is by far my favorite material I've heard from that band.
Good band, actually.
But hey, don't take my word for it. Listen for yourself, make your own decision. I'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching.
Nuclear warheads should be on the Geneva Convention Code for banned weapons of warfare, right up there with laser guns and shit like that, because like it's fuck, dude.